7 of them voted out of their seats. And while that was happening down in Florida,
but
a Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, said that he was going to redistrict his state to eliminate Democratic representation.
That was a moment.
There is no ceasefire happening on the part of Republicans.
That was a ceasefire. And in response to the ceasefire in Indiana, Virginia said, hold my beer, let me get rid of all of the wrong
Lydia,
votes.
you know, it wasn't a ceasefire. It was more like a mutiny.
Please like, subscribe, and share. In today's video, Phillip reacts as Lydia Mohin completely loses control during a heated debate on Newsnight. Gerrymandering has benefited both political parties over the years, but when district maps are manipulated to weaken communities and create guaranteed seats, voters are the ones who suffer. Let's jump in and watch Phillip shut down Lydia Mohin live on air.
Let me play an exchange that a Democratic state lawmaker had with a Republican about how they managed to carve up the black voters in the state in the way that they did.
So is that correct that the census data was the sole basis for drawing these lines from 2020?
Speaker Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, it's my understanding the census was used to draft the map you have in front of you.
Chairman Clement.
Based on the population.
Okay, well, that's pretty interesting because census data doesn't include any partisan scores or partisan data. And your whole entire argument this entire week has been that this is about politics and partisanship. So if you solely relied on census data, I'm confused about how you knew partisan scores when drawing this map, if that wasn't even considered.
Speaker Zachary.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
He doesn't answer the question because it is a good question. Are they using just census data or are they using race as a proxy for partisanship? And is that really, I mean, is that a smokescreen for carving up black voters?
I mean, you use proxies for partisanship based on socioeconomic factors, on income, on
race.
Geography, on zip code.
On race.
I've frankly have never seen that in any analyses that I've seen, though prior to the Cali decision, when there were redistricting efforts, they would look at that factor, they would look at race to figure out whether or not they're in compliance of Section 2 of the VRA. Now we're in a different world where we're not cabineting specific districts. Just like to state for the record, this is the guy who is currently representing that area.
So what? I mean,
we had
I don't
these independent
understand.
redistricting commissions.
What's the point of pointing out that Steve Cohen as well?
My point, we have the same issue in Michigan where we have an independent redistricting commission, right? It's independent. There's always going to be politics and gerrymandering, regardless of how you try to dress it up with nonpartisan commissions. You can try to control for the partisanship, but you're never going to eliminate that element. But I will say that, but the rich irony is that in both California and Virginia, they had independent redistricting commissions. They wanted to reform it, and then they cast off the shackles of the principles as soon as it was politically convenient.
Well, they asked the voters. Yeah. Unlike any of the other states that did not ask the voters.
Actually deceived the voters, depending on how
I'm actually
the
glad. Let's show the picture again. I'm glad that you brought up that he's a white representative that represents black districts, because guess what? They had the opportunity to choose. This is about taking away black Americans' opportunity to choose who they want to represent them. So whether that is white Representative Cohen, if that is Representative Pearson, who's black, who's running for that same district, who is, running against Cohen, the bottom line is it was set up, the Article 2 of the Voting Rights Act was set up to allow my community to have the choice, because so many choices have been taken away from us. And so when you take that away, but that's the element we're going to focus on tonight.
Michigan. Let's look at Michigan's congressional delegation.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a number of VRA seats that were drawn to make sure they had the appropriate amount of African-American voters, which, the assumption there is on the partisanship. Not a single one of them is represented by an African-American representative.
And I got
only representative in Congress.
I have a problem with that.
Please like, subscribe, and share. This debate is really about whether black voters have a fair opportunity to choose the leaders they want. That distinction is incredibly important. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 was created because states often used seemingly neutral strategies to weaken minority voting power. Instead of openly blocking people from voting, communities could simply be divided across multiple districts so their influence disappeared. On paper, everyone still had a vote, but in reality, their political power was reduced. That's why Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act remains so important. It was designed to stop map makers from splitting minority communities apart, just because those voters often support candidates one party dislikes. Peter Marr is correct that politics has always played a role in redistricting, but that doesn't mean every tactic should be accepted as normal. Saying, both sides do it, doesn't suddenly make it harmless. Some actions are far more damaging, especially when they consistently weaken the voices of specific communities. Teslin also raises an important point. Representation is about voter choice. If Black voters choose a white representative who reflects their values, that's completely their decision. The real issue is whether they're free to make that choice without manipulation. And the evidence shows why fair maps matter. Studies from political scientists have found that competitive districts often produce more moderate candidates and a government that is more responsive to voters. But when districts are manipulated, politicians become less accountable because they no longer need support from a wide range of people.
It's a little ironic that the woman now who is likely going to win the 9th district in Tennessee is a Black Republican woman as a result of this redistricting effort. It's likely going to be a Black Republican woman who beats that old white man.
I just wanted to make the basic point that in the presidential election, Trump got 65%, Kamala Harris got 35%. So it's easy to assume that Tennessee is 35% Democratic. Of the current 9 seats, 1 seat is Democratic. If 35%, it would be 3 seats would be Democratic. Right now it's 1. Under this new redistricting, it'll be 9 Republican, 0 Democratic. That's just not right. And this is happening all over our country, and it's destroying our country.
Yeah, I mean, Republicans were just complaining about this very thing in Virginia a couple weeks ago. And so now this is an even more extreme example of how, putting aside race for a second, just if you're a Democrat in the state, you have no shot of having a representative that has your interests in mind in Washington at this point.
Which is similar to many places in the Northeast. And I will say, I mean, I think the Tennessee move is in direct retaliation. And I'll say retaliation because Hakeem Jeffries said it was maximum warfare. That's what he said after the Virginia redistricting.
He was responding to Trump redistricting Texas.
Right. Which was in response to New York.
Why don't we just all agree?
Why don't we all agree? Let's all agree.
We're all different viewpoints. Why don't we all agree this is wrong? Gerrymandering is wrong. Safe seats is hurting our country because people do not listen to the people when they're in safe seats. They just pander to their base, and that's killing our country. Let's all agree. Conservative, liberal, moderate, whatever, all of us, whatever you guys are. Let's all agree this is wrong.
Agree. It's wrong.
And let's also agree that they won't be changing it. And let's also agree it's time for tit for tat. I know you say you don't want tit for tat. I support tit for tat.
What's the problem? We're not going to resolve anything.
It's okay. But you guys want to go there, so let's go there. Let's tit for tat. And with Representative Pearson, the energy that he brought today, and I put it out on my social media, everybody was loving it. They're not going to change it. So crying about it's not going to make a difference. California's going to make up the difference. Virginia's going to make up the difference. Organizing voters. Democrats need to flip the House and need to expand the Supreme Court because that's what this is about.
But where does this end?
It ends at the For the People's Act.
That's it.
The Democrats tried to pass and all voted for that banned partisan gerrymandering. It ends where we make dark money out of politics. It ends when you put Democrats who already voted for the John Lewis Voter Rights Act back in power, and you actually pass those things that make voter election day a holiday, that give us mail-in ballots, that give us safety in voting. All the things the Republicans are currently trying to rip away. Voter suppression started with gerrymandering, and then closing polling stations, and then limiting drop boxes, and then mail-in voting, and early voting, and same-day registration. Those are all taking away from certain communities that vote Democratic. We have to stop doing that. And it ends when you put Democrats in charge and you actually pass the laws that they tried to pass before and all voted for and Republicans voted against.
It ends with Democrats in charge? That's the goal. Okay, that is the goal. That's why the gerrymandering happened in protections.
And passing,
this is why the gerrymander keeps happening.
But Lydia,
Republicans are doing it in response to that.
Should Republicans end put their weapons down and say, hey, let's stop.
They actually did. In Indiana, they tried to do just that. They said, you know what?
In Indiana,
they said, we're not going to gerrymander.
Hold on, Lydia. That is not what happened, okay? Republicans did not say we're going to stop doing this. Some Republicans voted against it, and then they were targeted by the president this week. And 5 out of 7 of them voted out of their seats. And while that was happening down in Florida,
but this
a
is the
Republican
reality.
governor, Ron DeSantis, said that he was going to redistrict his state to eliminate Democratic
but that was a
representation.
moment.
There is no ceasefire happening on the part of Republicans.
That
Well, I don't
was
want
a
a
ceasefire.
ceasefire.
And in response to the ceasefire, in Indiana, Virginia said, hold my beer, let me get rid of all of the wrong
Lydia,
votes.
you know, it wasn't a ceasefire. It was more like a mutiny. And President Trump hated the fact that they pushed back on him. And you know why he hated it so much? He hated it because
so that doesn't
it's
count,
not,
Indiana? That just doesn't, no one
I'm
cares.
Just saying,
no one
that's
cares
not
that they opted not to gerrymander?
That's not the same thing as Republicans saying, we're not going to gerrymander anymore. Because at the same time that was happening, they were planning to gerrymander in Florida.
But you know what? You know what? All of those Republicans who were upset were right. Because Indiana said, we're going to stop it. And then
and guess what? We don't want
Virginia decided to gerrymander. So they were
and then Republicans spent $6 million voting them out of their seats.
And
Please like, subscribe, and share. One thing Lee McGowan and Abby Phillip get absolutely right is that both parties claim to hate gerrymandering until it benefits their own side. That's the real issue. When politicians are allowed to draw districts that protect themselves, elections become less competitive and voters lose influence. In many areas, the primary election becomes the only race that truly matters, rewarding the most extreme candidates instead of leaders willing to compromise. That's a major reason Congress feels more divided and dysfunctional today. Lee also connects gerrymandering to a much bigger pattern. It's not only about district maps, it's also about polling place closures, limits on mail-in voting, fewer drop boxes, and long wait times in already underserved communities. After Supreme Court decisions like Shelby County versus Holder weakened protections in the Voting Rights Act of 1965, several states quickly passed voting rules that critics argue disproportionately impacted minority voters. And one important point often gets overlooked. Expanding voting access doesn't magically help one political party. It simply allows more eligible Americans to participate in elections. If higher turnout is seen as a threat, that may say more about a party's policies than the voting system itself. Lydia's argument that Republicans are only reacting to Democrats also ignores the fact that national voting reform bills have already been introduced. Measures like the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and the For the People Act were designed to create nationwide standards for fair districts and easier voting access. Democrats supported those proposals, while Republicans largely opposed them.